Internet Explorer was a web browser that the younger generation probably never used, but knew as a meme, while for the older generation, it was both a beloved and frustrating first companion. It was often the first or second program we launched when we sat down at a PC. We connected to the entire world through it. We experienced internet surfing to the fullest thanks to it. But over time, we abandoned it to its fate. Today, we use Google Chrome, Opera, or Mozilla instead to access the internet. At its peak in the 2000s, Internet Explorer, Windows native browser, handled 95% of global internet traffic. But in recent years, its only job was to download another browser. So, what happened to Internet Explorer, which has now been shut down and replaced by Edge? In the 1950s, the foundations of what we now call the Internet were laid in the United States. Originally, it began as a way to connect different computers to one another. This initiative was supported by the US Department of Defense and expanded through a network called ARPANET. Over the years, the capabilities of this network evolved. And in 1989, an engineer named Tim Berners-Lee developed the World Wide Web system in his lab. This was the network system that forms the basis of today's web pages. He was the inventor of the www prefix we use in website addresses today. Thanks to the system he created, the internet enabled the sharing of various types of content, from text to video, audio to images, across different web pages. But what does any of this have to do with Internet Explorer? Web pages, by their nature, are documents made up of various lines of code. So when you visit your favorite YouTube channel like EvolTech, what you're actually seeing is a text-based document. Web browsers are the tools that convert these text files into the pages you see. And that's what we call a web browser. And that's exactly where the story of Internet Explorer begins. The World Wide Web was not accompanied by widely available internet browsers when it was first introduced. At that time, Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the web, developed a browser within the system he created called Nexus. Some even say that Nexus was the very first web browser. However, during that period, there was another browser that became more widely used and more popular than Nexus. It was called Mosaic. Mosaic was developed in 1993 by NCSA, the National Center for Supercomputing Applications in the United States. This browser offered the first generation of a standard web experience and was extremely popular at the time, attracting a lot of attention. Mosaic generated income for its owners by licensing its source code. According to this model, developers could purchase the rights to use the source code by paying a license fee. One of these developers was Microsoft, which licensed Mosaic's source code to develop a custom browser for the Windows operating system. These licensing deals ended the development of Mosaic under its original name, but allowed it to continue under different names. Of course, one of those names was Internet Explorer. Internet Explorer was first introduced in 1995 as part of the Windows 95 Plus pack. Later, it became a built-in browser that came bundled with Windows 98. However, there was another browser based on the Mosaic license, Netscape Navigator. By the mid-1990s, it had become the most popular browser of its time, thanks to its free usage model. At its peak, Netscape Navigator held around 50% of the browser market. It was so popular because it was free and very fast. Of course, we need to clarify what fast meant back then. Back in those days, loading a web page could take several minutes. The internet was slow, and browsers would only show the page after fully downloading it. Netscape didn't wait to download the whole page. It displayed content as it was received. That meant you could start reading the text within a second on text-heavy pages. Even though images loaded later, having the text appear quickly improved the browsing experience. Thanks to this, Netscape became the dominant browser of its time. But this dominance sparked a rivalry with Microsoft. Even though Internet Explorer released 3 different versions, it couldn't quite catch up with Netscape at the time. However, the success of Windows 95 gave Microsoft a major advantage. Since Internet Explorer came pre-installed, most people used it without seeking out alternatives. In the following years, with Windows 98 and Internet Explorer 4, it overtook Netscape and became the default browser for most Windows users. By 2001, Internet Explorer 6 was released alongside the hugely successful Windows XP, becoming the dominant browser worldwide. At its peak, Internet Explorer held 95% of global browser market share. But as with every peak, a decline eventually followed. And for Internet Explorer, it started right here. Explorer became the most used browser in internet history, and then the most hated. So, what exactly did they do wrong? Internet Explorer 6, after its release, fell into a long period of silence, so much so that for 6 years it didn't receive any new versions with significant improvements. Naturally, during this period, new competitors slowly started to appear. The most important of these competitors was Mozilla Firefox, a browser born from the ashes of Netscape in 2004. With its launch, Firefox attracted attention by offering users features that Internet Explorer lacked, such as tabbed browsing, search bars, third-party extension support, and customizable themes. Although Firefox couldn't catch up to Internet Explorer, it managed to surpass 10% usage share in a short time, an important success in this field. This situation, which shook Internet Explorer's throne, became even more serious when Apple's agreement with Microsoft ended. At that time, Apple devices used a specially developed version of Internet Explorer as their default browser. As part of a 5-year agreement, this setup made Internet Explorer the default browser on Apple devices. However, in 2003, Apple integrated its own browser, Safari, into the operating system, ending Internet Explorer's journey on the Mac. As a result, Internet Explorer, having lost ground on Mac, was also not performing well on its own platform, Windows. Internet Explorer didn't offer the extra features that Firefox provided, but it also started to struggle with its most basic function, browsing. Modern web designs and page structures were not fully compatible with Internet Explorer. When you visited a website, the layout could appear broken, buttons might not work, and navigating between links could cause problems. Pages you wanted to visit would either take too long to load or stop loading altogether before finishing. Known for its infamous crashing issues, Internet Explorer began to lose users gradually because of these problems. On top of that, this version became notorious for major security vulnerabilities. It got so bad that just viewing a web page could open a backdoor on your computer for hackers, allowing them to capture every key you pressed. Because of issues like these, Internet Explorer frequently made headlines and was widely criticized by cybersecurity experts as a browser that should not be used. At the time, Internet Explorer was so heavily criticized that it regularly appeared on lists of the worst tech products of all time. In 2006, Microsoft released Internet Explorer 7 with a major update. The new version finally included features like tabbed browsing, RSS feeds, and a search bar, features its competitors already had. However, this version also had a serious security vulnerability that affected thousands of computers. It still suffered from compatibility issues, and the updates didn't fix those problems either. Even with new versions and updates, Internet Explorer still failed to meet user expectations. As the browser continued to bleed users day by day, Google delivered the Dragon's Kiss in 2008. Google Chrome made a splashy debut and attracted attention with its WebKit rendering engine, tabbed browsing, full compatibility with next-gen web pages, faster loading times, and a clean yet practical interface made Chrome the browser people had been waiting for. Chrome was backed by Google. The fact that the world's largest internet search platform released this browser made it easier for people to trust it. After all, if your work is on the internet, it only makes sense to work with those who know it best. As a result, Internet Explorer continued releasing versions 8, 9, and 10 after Chrome's arrival. But its market share quickly shrank, especially after Chrome entered the scene. And while Internet Explorer fell, both Firefox and Chrome continued to rise. Another major factor in the decline of Internet Explorer was the rise of mobile devices. Internet Explorer was only available on Windows Mobile and Windows 10 devices, but the usage rate of these devices was very low. As a result, Internet Explorer failed to perform well in the mobile market. Meanwhile, Apple offered Safari and Chrome on its devices, while on the Android side, Google Chrome came pre-installed on nearly every device. Since the majority of internet access was shifting to mobile, Google Chrome's usage rate increased rapidly. Internet Explorer continued to lose users year after year. The newly released versions weren't enough to save the browser. And after 2012, Internet Explorer officially lost its leadership to Google Chrome. Microsoft couldn't stop this downward trend and decided to abandon Internet Explorer. In 2015, the company announced that with Windows 10, it would transition to a new browser and that Internet Explorer would be discontinued. And so, during this transition period, Internet Explorer slowly faded away. It was buried deep within the Windows system, in hard-to-access locations, and was replaced by the Edge browser. However, even Edge failed to deliver what was expected. At first, Edge used a different rendering engine than Chrome and Mozilla, which web developers couldn't adapt to easily. As a result, Edge faced similar compatibility issues just like Internet Explorer. On top of that, users who had become accustomed to Chrome couldn't use their extensions on Edge. So, rather than switching to Edge, users stuck with the browsers and extensions they were used to. Naturally, Edge also failed to meet expectations. On June 15, 2022, Microsoft officially announced it had ended support for Internet Explorer. And with a final update released on February 14, 2022, Internet Explorer, still present in all Windows 10 and later systems, was transformed into Edge and faded into the dusty pages of history. When we look at current web browser usage rates, we see that Google Chrome leads the way with a 64% market share. Edge, the browser meant to be the successor of Internet Explorer, currently holds only about 4%. Since Edge failed at first, Microsoft updated the browser and completely rebuilt its infrastructure based on Chrome. As a result, we can now say that Chrome and Edge are nearly identical in terms of features. Today, all the extensions and add-ons you use in Google Chrome can also be used in Edge. However, since user habits don't change easily, it's still unclear whether people will switch from Chrome to Edge. Of course, there are many more years ahead in the competition between these two. The death of Internet Explorer truly marked the end of an era. But like many other tech products that faded away, its end came from a lack of innovation, delayed responses to rivals, and, most importantly, missing the rise of mobile platforms. Still, we will always remember it as the browser we used to download other browsers. So, we've come to the end of another video. If you liked the video, you can support me by subscribing to my channel. See you in the next one, take care and goodbye.